Mr. Rahul, Mr. Chopra, we have with us the other panel members of the panel discussion. The discussion is going to be moderated by Mr. Velprakash, who's the Executive Director with JLL. We also have with us Mr. Sean Bassler, who's joining us from US, from Perkins Eastman. We have Akshat Pandya, sir. And also, I have with us Mr. Indrajit Savji, though he's on mute and this. He is the one of the directors with ITP Media Group. So with this and the introductions, I am going to hand this over to Mr. Velprakash and to take this forward with the panel discussion titled Profit by Design. Mr. Velprakash, over to you.
Thank you, Rashmi. Very warm good morning to all the distinguished speakers. It's a pleasure to kind of moderate this session. It's kind of a very diverse panel of architects from different geographies that we are here today to talk on and deliberate on. First of all, my thanks to the organizers, ITP Media, for getting such a diverse panel onto this morning session. Profit by design. I just wanted to get in a little bit of a context to this. So like architecture and design today is more like getting influenced by the aesthetics and visual fare as of now. But it's closely being controlled by various factors. I'm trying to get a context here, such as you have the money getting invested into it, what is the return on investment that's coming in, and what is the sustainability part, quotient, performance, flexibility, functionality, and etc. and etc. So which are these factors, has become a go-to entity. Most of these factors have become a go-to entity for these developers and the builders today in the current world. Even the corporates would like to reap the maximum benefit from their footprint of real estate that they own or they lease or whatever. So it means that a lot of coordination that is required to kind of be done with different stakeholders who are going to be involved in developing the design. So I would want to kind of put in some questions to the distinguished speakers. Like, I would like to call upon first Sean. So Sean, you coming in from a different geography altogether, can you give us a quick outline of what is this kind of streamlined measures that you take in the design and execution process, which can be followed by what we are doing in Indian context with all the other speakers can speak on?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be part of such a distinguished panel here. And just a little bit about Perkins Eastman. I mean, we're a global architecture firm, and although we're headquartered here in the U.S., we practice all around the world, and including in India, where we have an office in Mumbai. But we pretty well work everywhere else, and our practices, our markets extend everywhere from the commercial markets, hospitality, mixed use, commercial, to institutional like healthcare and education, and I think we have the pleasure of being able to work in so many different places. In so many different contexts, and while there's a lot of differences in the countries that we work and nuances, there's a lot of commonality, and I think that every project has to be profitable, right? And there's a lot of things that you put into it, but it also has to have. We always say that beyond that, buildings and places that we create have to have a bigger social impact and community impact beyond just the profitability of it. And so there's a lot of things that we do in the design process to really understand not only the client's business needs, but also the community and social needs that go into every project, even if it's a commercial project, and what they mean for it. But we try to engage very early on with our clients to understand their business plan and what their goals are. So it's not just about creating a good building or a great place, but it's sort of understanding both the design goals as well as the economic goals with the clients. And it involves a lot of different people. It involves a lot of different consultants, and it involves a real team process, I think, in everything that we do.
Thank you, Sean. What I was talking about is the first thing is about what are the steps that in today's world, architects, we as architects, are taking to kind of streamline the design and the execution process. That's the question that.
Well, so of course, our approach here in India is obviously suited to the conditions that we build in, and many a times they vary from a major metropolis city like Delhi or Mumbai as compared to when you're doing projects in smaller cities. While technology and other processes allow us to function in a very modern way, comparable to anywhere internationally, when it actually comes to execution at site, it's a very different environment. Often we do enough research on the places that we are building to see the kind of expertise that we would get. And I'll be honest to say we change our designs and our approach once we know where are we building, who are we building for, and what are the likely kind of specialists who will build this. Sometimes it's possible to do so because the way our processes are, very often one doesn't do good for construction drawings before a tender stage, and it's a process which keeps happening during construction. So it allows us to do that. There are disadvantages of that system, but we often make sure that based on the city and the place where we're building, we are able to design something which can be executed well. So that involves a lot of research all the time, constantly in places that you're building. You'll find that even if large and good contractors build your designs, if you go from the metros to the non-metros, the kind of subcontractors and local expertise they hire is not the same. So it's quite challenging. And what we try and do is do our best to do enough research on that place before we decide how to detail our designs or what technologies to use. It's an exciting process. It's a challenging one, but it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, thanks, man. We will share. I mean, we will try to hear the perspective from one of the contracting partners who are also part of this session. So while we heard pretty good in terms of Rahul talking about GFCs getting into the construction phase and all of that, I would like to hear this perspective from Rahul Chopra, because he's been involved in many such execution of large assignments. What is his perspective, and share his views, please.
See, typically, when you start constructing, you have to see the terrain, you have to see the location, you have to see the dynamics of things like seismic load, the environmental factors, the wind pressure zones, etc., in a particular area. But besides that, you also have to see availability of raw materials. Today, we find there are a number of places where the traditional basic raw materials are not available. Therefore, people have to become adaptable to using raw materials or building construction products which are more relevant and will help you build easier, build economically in a particular region. The other factor which seems to be gaining a lot of prominence of late is environmental concerns. Globally, people are talking about carbon footprint, they're talking about green, and is gaining more and more prominence. So while you are building, you have to build, and as we say, you have to reimagine design, you have to reimagine your efficiency, as well as you need to reimagine sustainability. But besides that, you also need to reimagine the environment today and the environmental concerns today. And when you take all these factors into place, typically a building, you would look at the energy efficiency in a building, you would look at the sustainability of a building, you would look at various other factors. But all in all, I mean, the fact still remains that times are changing. There are modern times coming up. So you have to use modern solutions, modern technology. A lot has been enabled today. And as we go along, a lot more will be enabled.
Thank you. Akshat, you want to throw some light on this?
If we sort of limit ourselves to a conversation in India alone, then there, we do have a fairly wide spectrum of places where we do engage with projects, right? So you have the metropolises, and it's pretty much similar to what Rahul said. I think what I would like to add is that when you work outside the metropolis and you work with unstructured clients, which is a majority of clients in India, you need to engage very seriously in programmatic development. So your input quality is good. If your input quality keeps changing, or the programmatic inputs keep changing, they do have an impact on the processes that you can sort of put in place. And eventually, when we are building outside the metropolis, we do try and see our buildings as sort of open-ended frameworks more than sort of deterministic classical forms where nothing can change. As far as execution and monitoring and sort of and interfacing is concerned, I think technology does help with that. So we do track projects. We have fairly simplified methods of communicating with our site teams. And I think India's come a long way in the last 20 years with that.
That's actually a very interesting thing that you have actually put across. I just wanted to talk a little bit, hear a little bit about how this technology is being kind of implemented or rather adapted in the design process. Can you throw some lights on the BIM implementation and all of that? And maybe we can start with Akshat, then we go with others.
Technology for implementation. Well, I think again, we've been writing for a while spec sheets and documents. If we're talking only about execution, we've been writing documents for performance criteria more than sort of bland descriptive documents, which means we've I think for the last 10 years we've been inviting people to propose a technical solution to a sort of design criteria that we've posed. So that means there's a lot of pre-engineered, prefabricated components to what we do. Also because sometimes our building forms are complex, so sometimes they tend to be three-dimensional curves, not symmetric, and we've seen that over the last 7 or 8 years now in India, rapid prototyping and sort of CNC milling, be it additive or subtractive processes, they are available to us, and we've been able to demonstrate that our buildings don't get a lot more expensive just because of that. Instead, we save time and we do control quality, and that allows us to do fairly sort of complex, even historic interventions in good time and with a fairly high quality. And I think once you realize that the building industry can support such things, even the design studios sort of start engaging actively with sort of digital software. So there's a lot of Grasshopper and Rhino work that we do, that we send out, and it gets done. It's actually heartening to see that it does get done quite easily.
So, Sean, next question to you, more directed towards how you see implementation of BIM being the most next in thing in the future. Can you show or throw some light on that?
Well, I think technology is really disrupting our industry in two different ways. I think on one hand, there's the data analytical part, which allows us to design smarter buildings. That I think is going to be the way of the future of how we can really do predictive analytics and then create the technology that lives and breathes with our buildings and our clients to make them more efficient and operable as they go forward. But the second part is in the design and execution, which I think that we're talking about here, which with BIM, it's all going to be integrated. I mean, the things we can do with parametric design right now are endless. It's but how we then create them and turn these forms into executable and buildable shapes. We have the capability now to make sure that can happen, and all the building systems and everything's are incorporated. So I think that at some point these sort of two uses of technology come together, and we're seeing that in a lot of in some of our projects with very sophisticated clients, where we're really starting on the pre-programming phase, looking at, before we build the program, on doing a lot of data analytics and understanding sort of the environment, whether it's what the use is going to be, how the environment's going to impact the building, letting that then inform the design, but then integrating them, and then kind of when the building is built, letting the model and those analytics sort of live with the client. So the buildings are becoming smarter and more adaptable. And I think what somebody said earlier was important also, that buildings have to be designed as flexible, and so the more data analytics and the more you can kind of see how your buildings are performing after they're open, allows you to adjust things, whether it's through environmental conditions or through programming and uses and things like that. So I think that technology and the use of technology, it's not just, I mean, the design and execution is becoming so much more integrated to the construction industry, but it's everything else. What's interesting for us is everything else around that, and how we're using data and other analytics to integrate with the BIM models that we're creating. And I think that sort of intersection is quite interesting going forward.
Good. Different perspective altogether. Rahul Kumar, I just want to ask, how is this implementation of BIM or its adoption is being there in the industry? Can you share some insights onto that?
We started quite early with this, the BIM process. As a practice, we do a fair bit of hotels and hospitals, and they involve a lot of services, often in complicated manners. So we started a long time back, and over the course of the last 10 years, I would say, there have been reasonable successes in the different processes that we follow. Of course, within our studios, we have a certain number of stations that are BIM enabled, but obviously there are limitations to what degree and level we can go to. So often in larger complicated projects, other specialist agencies are taken in, which we find quite useful, because they're not able to not only pick up our BIM models till a certain stage, but then take it onwards to the contractors level, where you have to handle the shop drawings and eventually, of course, transfer it to facility management. So at the end of the day, when you finish that smartly designed building, the facility manager and the occupant should be able to use that models for information that they require. And it's still, it's a process we are learning. We are trying different strategies, but I feel beyond the architects, one should have a specialized agencies, because with the technology and the softwares, they can do a lot more than what we can do with our basic BIM and Revit models. And I think the teams are getting larger and larger. As Sean just said about data analytics, and right at the programming stage, there's so much of an information overload. In fact, our client teams are so educated, or during the process get educated, that there's a lot of data coming in. So our teams have to be smarter and bigger to handle and just assimilate that data to make sure we make the best use of it. And therein, I feel a specialized agencies which can take it beyond the design level to the execution and eventually facility management is probably the best process. We find that with our little experience on projects to be most useful.
I would like to direct my next question to Mr. Pandya on, what is your perspective of BIM implementation in the current world and how it is being very naturally being adopted in the current age of architectural practice? Can you share some perspective
All
on that?
right, my apologies for a glitch. I hope I'm now audible. But I think a wrong person to be asking this question. We are a little more primitive and would prefer to stay that way. Not because we are any against technology. We do use all technologies possible, but I would like to put and turn this whole thing in a sequence around. As I was beginning to say, that design is the true DNA in which all of these gets factored in. And for that, like somebody said, the background research, like I'll compare it with the doctors, the diagnosis is the true key. And even in medical science, you can do as many tests as you want to, get the kind of pin it down to the kind of disease. But actually, you are trained to do this all without any tests. So first step first. So if you know the people, the place, and the context in terms of climate and other factors and resources correctly, and base your design on that, then rest of the burden is already taken away. I mean, just a very stupid but simple example. If we know that soap actually gets disintegrated less by the body contact but more by it being put on a soap tray, and therefore a simple design solution that you have an arc like this, so that the contact point of that is minimized, is a brilliant kind of way to ensure economics, to ensure it's matching with the body contour, and so on and so forth. So what I mean is that that's exactly where, as the role of a designer, it comes in. Now, of course, nowadays it's a multidisciplinary team, and on one side, as much it's a beam and the technology, on the other side, it's as much the craftsmen and the local people. Because even their training, if a plumber is not well trained, doesn't matter what you do with the technology on one hand, the execution and then the leakages and then the subsequent problems. So all I'm trying to say is that which is where the design need to factor in, and of course then any tool that helps. So I would not give too much weightage to the tool. It was not that without the kind of sonography, certain things were not diagnosed. So of course, and that doesn't mean there is any aversion to it, but as and when and whatever that gets needed for. So it's not the hospital setup that cures you, it's still the doctor that cures you. So his diagnosis, for that the background research, and for that the whole simple thing of being appropriate to the place and people. And in that appropriateness, the economic, the environmental, the structural, as well as the aesthetic criteria. And when you evaluate from all point of view, now if the tool helps you to visualize things by the CAD model, so be it. If it helps you with the physical model, with physical thing, I'm little more familiar, comfortable with it, because your sense of involvement is higher. It's like you are with mind, and it's like playing Barbie, that you are visualizing things with your mind and with your feel all together, versus something that just sort of gets partly done by something else, which is little away from you. So that way I'm a little primitive on this.
Very, very, very interesting insight and anecdotes. Mr. Chopra, how about you in terms of your domain? How do you kind of see BIM implementation as a kind of a game changer?
Oh, I won't really talk about BIM implementation. I'll talk more in lines of technology being used in building construction today. So, besides being a building materials producer, we are also a pre-engineered buildings designer, design and manufacturer. So we do end-to-end design of pre-engineered buildings from the beginning to end. Now, when you do these buildings, or you implement these buildings and you execute these buildings at site, right from the conceptual stage to the completion stage, there is technology and software that plays a very, very dominant and important role, right from the beginning to the end. You have your design software, whether you use an AutoCAD or a StatPro or a Tekla, XYZ, you are today totally dependent on technology. to manage your business effectively, you will use some kind of an ERP system. So we, for example, use SAP. There are people who might use an Oracle, but technology becomes you become very, very dependent on technology. You become very dependent on these systems that are available, and they keep evolving and they keep growing. Uh, what it helps you, and as I think Sean mentioned earlier, it helps you do a lot of data analytics. It will helps you do a lot of bring in a lot of efficiency in design. Today, things like energy efficient buildings are gaining prominence. You need to bring all that into your design component, and it's usually finally software which helps you. I mean, I'll give you a very small example. I wanted to get a solar installation done on my roof at home, and finally somebody came with some software, and he was able to measure on which side the solar panels are to be installed, which direction should they face, and how efficient it will be, and how much electricity it will generate from it. So again, for all this, technology is being used. There's some kind of algorithms working in the back end which make it very effective, and I would say pretty accurate. And today, for our business in totality, we are totally dependent on softwares and technology. Uh, People involvement is there. Without people involvement, technology would not be successful. So you have to have the people, but you also have to have certain processes and process parameters in place to make sure you deliver the right quality to the expectations of your client.
May I just put in one extension? I mean, see, technology doesn't mean it's only the software and the tools. It's also the way you systematize the thing. So, one end it's what to do at the office, but the other one is at the site itself. How much practices that we follow may be deterrent to this concept? For example, 3 o'clock at night, because of the restrictions on the highways or the roads, the trucks of the sand or any building material comes and dumps the material at one corner of the site because there's nobody else to stay where to put it. After that, the labor does everything to put it in one place. Then it goes to the place where it is actually required. And in each place, there's a breakage, there's a labor involved, and it's just an example. So streamlining the entire operation. So there's so many such things where other components of cost as well as time as well as the ease of operation gets ignored. So it's not just the tool and the software, but there are many other processes that needs to be looked into. Also, the method by which person or the level of craftsmanship person is going to do it, and then plugging all that, and therefore in your detailing, taking care of all these factor into account. Like Mr. Corbusier, when he wanted to do first building in India, Mr. Doshi took him to Atira building by architect Kanvin there, just to understand what Brut Baton was like, so that he knew what kind of concrete he's going to get, and he might have streamlined his design thoughts around that. And he must have also felt confident that he can do that. And so what I mean is that it's all plugging those ends as a thing, as a total system that you may call technology, not one hardware, one software.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So another contrasting question. Today we talk about coordination between multiple stakeholders or multiple requirements from a client's team, from architects, from project managers like us. We face a lot of challenges in terms of coordinations and all of that. How do you think these things are something that can be addressed in a real-time scenario when we actually do the design development and all of that? Some perspective, maybe I would go with Akshat. You want to kind of show some or throw some light on that, Akshat, please?
The fact is that, tools and technology changes over time. What doesn't change is the need for, inspiring technique. And that's deeply personal, what you do with it. Remember that architecture has to perform, but it also has to emote. And I think that's more often than not, when we get into these discourses, they sort of pulled in those two directions. Fact is, whatever you do, when you create a built environment, you're doing it for a human condition, and you want it to be an emotive, sort of inspiring space. everything else follows, and everything has to sort of be subservient to it. Technology does help with a lot of legwork. You just need to know how to use it easily. I think there's a sea change that's happened in architecture over the last 25 odd years, and that's because the majority of the world's population is now living in cities, right? And we're consuming energy like nobody ever imagined before. That's where you start using cutting edge sort of construction planning and sort of monitoring devices, so you can track what you're doing, and you can actually improvise as you go along and learn from it. That's really all. I don't think that becomes the generator of design in any which way.
Just to add on to the question, thank you, Akshat. Just to add on the question that Mr. Velprakash put in, I guess what he was coming from was today, architect alone is not the master of the project. There are so many stakeholders involved, right? Right from the project heads to the consultants to the facility managers, the operations head, post even the handover, the individuals who are there, everyone comes together tied into the design process of a building. So given that so many stakeholders are involved, it's absolutely not a one-man game show anymore. And given that there are so many design inputs into a single structure or a single space, what I'd also like to know is, how is these processes being streamlined by companies, especially the scale and projects that you guys handle is massive, and the kind of inputs and consultants and heads that are there into the design process is also numerous. So given this, what Mr. Velprakash was also coming from is, when these kind of involvement is there, how are the processes, how is the synergy maintained in the design process? How are the conflicts resolved, which I'm very sure that is there, and how are the processes streamlined here as such? Anyone can take that question, Ms. Sir.
Again, I'm a little on my note, but I would go with it, saying that what we do is that we make a first presentation to the entire team about the intent as an architect or as a visualizer of the project. So even structural engineer knows that what kind of a language or what kind of a concern are we coming from. Like when there was a building done with the recycled waste, we had approached multiple structural engineers, and they would have come up with certain kind of a mindset, like a plastic bottle to be used as a brick in the wall. And typical mindset would say, oh, cut the top and put a lean concrete in it and it will become a brick. But we say, no, we don't want to use concrete in it. It's going to be used in a slum and stuff like that. So what I mean is that when everybody is on the same page in terms of knowing first the essence or the spirit or the bottom lines of it, it could be even technical, not just aesthetic, then I think they work towards it. And then right from the first stage, you begin to resolve that. And then periodic discussion, even before you freeze your design, that what are your needs and priorities, and you give us the duct size, or you give us the kind of recently that project didn't come through, but before we did anything else, we had asked the air conditioning person, because it's a centralized hotel, air conditioned hotel, and then we said that what kind of animal would your ducting would be, basically, so that in space we know what kind of things to provide for. And then that becomes a brief for structural engineer, that where there's a crossover, you took look after this. So it's just a simple thing that even otherwise, one may understand, but kind of process that certain things taken not after your design and given as a package for something to resolve, but all along, and even before, including contractor, before they start construction, we have made presentation to say that in this project, this is what is intended, this is what final outcome is expected to be, and we are hoping to do it in this manner, So
that
maybe
everyone's
it's a soft talk, but at least people probably become on a kind of the same page in that sense.
Absolutely.
It's just one thought.
Sean, you wanted to add something here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two parts to that. One, from a project management standpoint on larger projects, it's the project management software that we all use that helps organize the traffic flow of communication to make sure that everything's sort of put into the same place. But I think that the biggest shift in technology is how the BIM model really now becomes sort of the center of it all. So in most of our projects now, where the entire team is integrated. We're using BIM 360, so the models in the cloud, everything ties into it, and then you're running through your different phases, the clash detection and things like that. So that helps manage the workflow. That helps manage. You can have 100 consultants on a job, right? Just from your primary consultants to specialty consultants, but everybody's integrating to the same model. Everybody's running their sort of pieces of it and making sure that it's all integrated. So I think that's a bit. I mean, the project management software is elevated from where it was years ago, but it's the BIM models, I think, that's kind of bringing everything together at this point and allowing everybody to work simultaneously in one model.
Just one insight I have here. In fact, I would love to hear from Rahul, Kumar, and Akshat, and so Mr. Chopra on this. We did speak about how important BIM is and how what the precedence it's taking and the stake that BIM has in it. But I do also realize that India is still extremely nascent in its adoption for BIM. And obviously, I am from the other side of the line, but of what I see in the this, I know everyone's talking about BIM and everyone's talking about the technology, but when it even comes to the grassroots level, I do realize there's a lot of vacuum there. And Akshat, Rahul, both of you all, while working in the industry, so the thing is sometimes I see that if it's there in the client's quotation, if they ask for it, that is when BIM is implemented into the process as such. So I don't know how many times that happens, but I just want to hear from y'all. What do y'all think is the ground reality here? Y'all obviously work with several developers, with several clients. How is their mindset with regards to this particular technology and going forward onto this as such?
I mean, I can only speak from our firm's project experience and the last 5 to 10 years. Obviously, if you are engaged for a project where the BIM is requested from the client side,
exactly,
is done to whatever levels. But as a firm, we always like to see that we get the real benefit of it, because you're spending a lot of time, man hours, a lot of meetings, a lot, intelligent minds put together. And if it doesn't get you that use that you want in a shorter time, then it doesn't make sense.
But is our industry ecosystem ready with that adoption? I mean, I see the architects are in line with it, the developers are getting in line with it. But what about beyond that? Is that entire ecosystem
the larger contractors are also BIM enabled. A company like Larsen & Toubro would do their own BIM. Sadly, for some projects that we did, they did not take our base models. They like to build the BIM themselves. Beyond the contractor's level, it needs to get into facility management and eventually to the users who are going to manage that building. So I think specialized agencies taking it all the way till the end, and that's where you reap the full benefit of it. Answering to your point that do architects only do it when asked for? Once you get into that, depending upon, of course, the expertise that you have and how many people are trained on that, I think firms are trying out and building their own models, even if not asked for. Public sector and government projects, you will often find a line which says should have a BIM, but do they really use it? Do they have enough interactions? Sadly, no. We've done many such projects where you spend all that time, but the time seen from the client or project manager's side to actually get benefit out of it is not really done. So I think there we have a long way to go. It's for people to get full benefit and get into it. So, but it's a process, and like I said, on larger, complicated projects and with good contracting agencies, it's picking up more and more.
So one last I wanted to put across. Now, while always we say form follows function and all of that, and today we design for purpose and everything, do we ever as architects go back and look at what they have designed as actually really performs the purpose that has been designed for? And I throw open this question to everyone. may want to kind of.
And I'll just add to that, and I'll tell you why that question is there in this. The thing is, I've been speaking to a lot of facility managers, all right, the operation heads, and they have such massive complaints from the community. They are like, do you guys even once come back to the building and check how it's performing? All your flaws is supposed to be corrected by us. Do you all even come to see how it's rated or how it's this? Do you all even come to see 2 years later, like where the leakages or where the sunlight, the glare is staring at our face? Do you all even realize how much correction goes after you all hand over that building? And hence, I wanted to put in this question and out to anyone can take it forward as such. Yes.
Ours is a very small kind of an endeavor in that, but I think most of our project post-occupancy evaluation of many sort have been the practice. And it's not for good talk, I'm saying that, for example, one of the post-disaster housing, 18 villages that we worked on, actually, after 10 years, we were, for some other reasons, asked to go document whether our kind of design decisions or whether our set of approach had really worked or not. And we've done a massive study on that. Same way, recycle waste, and therefore to look at its performance post certain years. So any kind of thing that you've deviated with, same way the non-invasive methods to have sustainable building, and therefore to really see the performance. It's a good thing to say that cavity wall will give you insulation, but how has it performed over time? So whether it's a kind of a scientific method or it's at least observational method, or at least it's a rapport with the user and then trying to figure that out. And many of, at least in our project, there's been that sort of a rapport. So they do come forth and share that. So, and documentation has been one of the things that we have practiced. So even for that, we have been sort of able to, just to give one example, very small intervention, and this is what I would also supplement the beginning part of it. In a slum, in 3 side shared houses in urban area, where deep long house, the last room without any courtyard or any such aperture is pitch dark and terribly hot with a GI sheet on top. And we did some intervention, very small intervention called Ujasyu, which means light and ventilation sort, with a very small sort of thing such as a dormer cut window, or even a empty plastic water bottle to get the internal reflection of a sun and give you the glow inside. And for 1 year, more than 100 families were monitored to understand their monthly electricity bill. For every 1 year, for more than 100 families, data to show that minimum of 250 rupee saving in electricity a month. That was the satisfying part of that intervention, that one small something there with no cost could bring out that. And not only that, the other index is also that they could actually, they do home-based economic work. So now that they got brighter light inside without having to run electricity and fan to that extent, they were able to generate 1,500 rupee additional income worth of extended work from home hours and stuff like that. The kids could do the homework from there, etc. So their health indices, their education factor, the other welfare. So like Akshat Bhai was saying, that eventually it's a quality of life that it can change into. So it's not just economic, it's not the technology, but architecture going to people to essentially make a difference and add value to the quality of life. And same was with the post-earthquake rehabilitation. We constantly monitored. Same was with earlier where I was with Aranya low-cost housing. Every 6 months we used to document how people have built their houses on a very basic framework that was given, even for us to learn from that. And that's where that builds your own theory or research base and data rather than the beam for learning from these experiences for future. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah. Anyone else want to take the question as such?
I'd like to add a little bit here.
Sure.
When you say architects don't go back to buildings, in India, sometimes it's a very different experience. If you have repeat clients, and a firm like ours often has repeat clients, you don't have a choice. if you're involved with that client group for another project or assignment, there is no way that you are not looking into that building you did previously for them. And I can say so many buildings that we did 15 or 20 years back, even till now, I'm going to them because there's always a process of a renovation, a change, a new requirement, and a building lives. I mean, you designed it for a purpose 5 years ago, but things change, and often the client groups will call you back to say that this is what we are wanting to do, but we still want your opinion on it. So you do go back, and for some cases where, let's say, that doesn't happen, we normally try and see that every 3 years or every 5 years somebody is visiting that property or that project just to see how it's evolved. Many a times other hands come in, other designers, other consultants may come in to make changes, and that's when you kind of lose a little bit of control because one doesn't really know how things have been modified too much.
Absolutely.
But there is a connect. I would say in India there is a connect because often it builds into a professional relationship which goes longer.
All right. Okay. Anyone else who would want to talk onto this?
I think every building, there's some level of post-occupancy evaluation that happens, and even as was just mentioned, if it's a repeat client, but what we like to see is try to engage with the client beyond that. There's so many data analytics that you can get from buildings now. Every building has some sort of smart component to it, even at a very primitive level on how the building's performing with regard to energy efficiency and systems and things like that. But what we're really interested also, particularly with some of our institutional clients, is understanding, as what was mentioned, not only how the buildings perform, but what is the impact on the occupants and the result of that. And one really interesting example is with one of the largest school districts here in the United States, in Washington, D.C. We've designed a number of schools, and one of the schools that we designed a few years ago was one in the most impoverished neighborhood. So it's a brand new school, but we put a lot of environmental analytics in it, and the whole idea after that was to do a study over time to see, does design have an impact on the education of the kids, and what is the result on that? And so we kind of did a whole research assignment with regard, looking at the performance of the building, the energy efficiency of the building, what the environmental factors are, where the sunlight was, how it performed, all that stuff like that. But we did a separate parallel research on the education of the students, which was in actually one of the lowest performing neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. And so what happened was, the result was that the building had a real change in the performance of the student. And so that research then led to another sort of deep dive with the school district and other school districts. And so I think that's the interesting part. It's that buildings, yes, they perform. You can do all kinds of analytics to understand how they perform, but you really want to understand how they impact people that use them in the communities that are there. And we're seeing a lot more of this in with a lot of our educational clients, with a lot of our workplace clients, and a lot of our healthcare clients. So I think that's quite interesting, and I think it's sort of what I said at the beginning, that how data is used is really the way of the future.
Absolutely. Just one.
Just one small sentence.
Sure.
Design it's not a business. It's like a parenting. So it's like a father and a daughter. Even if you get your daughter married, you're not cut off this thing. So you are always there, and it's your baby.
Just before we close in, I just heard inputs from the design segment. I just want to hear it from Mr. Chopra, given that he's from the supplier segment, side of the line. I just want to understand, Mr. Chopra, what's your take on this? How does your, how do you think your approach to buildings and structures post-handover works at your end as such?
Okay, so I'll tell you, we are a supplier. We are also a producer of entire buildings. And the reality is, when you deliver a building to a client, he tests it in all its entirety, in totality. He checks whether the building is performing to specification. I'm not saying there might be small issues that are there, but you are expected to resolve it and hand it over. And
Correct.
typically what is done is that, at the time of designing, you also take the buy-in of the client, what you are actually doing. And I don't think
Absolutely.
any architect or any designer in the country today really washes their hands off what they've created. All
Okay.
of them stand by it, and if they agree with it, and I think what I've seen, they follow it through.
Okay. That's
Yeah, and
that's
I mean the fact is the designer, the architect, somewhere along I heard there are multiple stakeholders. How do you manage them? It's that one person who integrates all these together to create a design now which works. They reimagine a design they reimagine it from the efficiency point of view, they reimagine it from the sustainability point of view. So
absolutely.
it's a very important piece, and just getting all the stakeholders together and getting them to accept it, and showing them the vision, showing them the path is what an architect does. And today, I think you're going to be facilitating a lot of youngsters in this field.
I think with this, we'll take a wrap on this session. Mr. Velprakash, in case if you have anything else to add or something like that. Yeah.
Many. Thank you for actually sharing your views on this.
Oh,
and it is a
absolutely.
very diverse
Absolutely agreed.
panel, I think.
Absolutely. I'm
All is-
so glad to have each one of you all came with such different pack of thought processes, right from Rahul to Sean to even Yatin sir. Like you all had this mixed match of little jumbles that was putting in. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Akshat, for coming in. I knew you wanted to run out. And I'm so glad you stayed back. Thank you so much for that and for your patience, gentlemen. So with this, I'll be ending the recording. And I'll send you all the video just in case for you all to have a look at it. I'll send you all the transfer file or something like that. Thank you so much. Have a good day, gentlemen. And Mr. Batla, I hope you have a good night there. Really, thank you for joining.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks for having.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you all. And keep
Absolute
safe.
pleasure.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking a quick lunch break. We'll be back here in the next 30 minutes. I'd love to see you all join us for the next session of the day, the second half, which is again packed with some extremely interesting speakers and presentations. So please stay with us, and we'll join us back after lunch. Thank you so much.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this gray clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very gray background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this gray clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very gray background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this gray clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very gray background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. Art, materials, and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects, and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.
हर त्योहार के पीछे होती है अपनों की एक कहानी। हमारे कमरे यूं ही नए नहीं होते, इनके साथ जुड़ी होती हैं रिश्तों की निशानी। कभी नया घर लिया बच्चों की शादी के लिए, तो कभी छोटा सा कमरा रेनोवेट किया घर के नए मेहमान के लिए। कहीं दद्दू के लिए मार्बल जैसी टाइल्स लगवाई, तो कभी आपके बेटर हाफ ने किचन वाली टाइल्स मंगवाई। कुछ ऐसे ही तो बढ़ती हैं घर के हर जोड़ में रिश्तों की ताकत। अब चाहे बैंक के लोन से हो या फिर हो बोनस के लिए मेहनत, हम पूरी करते हैं अपनों की हर छोटी बड़ी रिक्वेस्ट। अपनों की खुशियों को करते हैं सेलिब्रेट। करो रिश्तों को रेनोवेट।
We do, in our entire design thought process, try to tell a story through our work, through our thinking. art, materials and architecture has always been hand in glove in the entire process. We've usually not like to use any product where it's made to look like something else. So we just like the natural look of a fiber cement board. The board itself allowed us to create a palette where we had this grey clay-like surrounding, and then we had little jewels of art juxtapositioned against this very grey background. It's almost been a decade now, and I go back and see these projects and they have performed very well.
Want to be as relaxed as Virat? Get an AC with a special filter that deactivates microbes and viruses in the air that passes through it. Blue Star AC with virus deactivation technology. Blue Star, owned by Virat, loved by Virat.